1930s, I was discussing that, and I told you that if you look at the history, there are a lot of big popular kings and emperors and all. Somewhere they have used these spending policies to stimulate the economy whenever there was a crisis. But obviously crises are not so common in a economy very editorially oriented. This crisis is more common in the industrial sector. Why? It's more common in the sector because industrial sector is more competitive. So your traditional microeconomics of perfect competition applies to macro also. There's only one or two problems which I'll come to a little later. But in the moment economy becomes non-agricultural or not so agriculturally oriented, non-agricultural, then what happens? The industrial sector changes from perfect competition to imperfect competition, various forms, oligopoly, monopoly, and economic competition, and so on and so forth. And that basically makes it system to be everybody having more capacity than they need at a particular point of time. And they also plan well ahead because you can now change the capacity. You got your cost chapters and all. You plan long-term capacity and short-term capacity, and that's how you go. And you normally have advanced. This is one of the reasons if you go to the Microsoft case. Microsoft case, you remember it went to the court 2 years back. One of the reasons Microsoft was able to win or kind of penalize was on this basis. Because one of the contention which was used against Microsoft was it has a huge excess capacity. If you have huge excess capacity, what does that mean? In a simple cost context, if you have a cost, Microsoft is here and it is falling further, and competitors will start over here. If anybody is trying to be competitive and charging this price, Microsoft also charges the same price, suppose at the same price, then Microsoft can overproduce and kill you. Because by overproducing, your cost will go down, and this is something called the literature, which you may get to know later on, or predatory price. You can predate your guys or something into the market, and that will kill them, and then you stay in company. Now the problem is, if you look at imperfect competition, the same result will hold for all the cases. Now it's very difficult to prove whether you have excess capacity to kill off the competition, or you have excess capacity because you are imperfectly competitive going on. Both will give you the same result. So they had economists on both sides. Microsoft and again Microsoft. I think you must have heard a story. Not a story, it's actually real life example. There was a very big gathering of economists. They called something called World Economic Congress, which happens once in 5 years or I don't know how many years. So around 1999 to 98 something. A very massive conference of almost like 700 economists across the world coming to the conference, and also it was almost 3-4 weeks, 4-5 days conference, and there was all the delegates who came, their air tickets, everything, and also travel around, everything was taken care of, and also touring around the city, because somewhere in the US was taken care of by one company. I don't have to tell you the company that was. So you have to keep humoring conversations if you want to stay in the business, because they will defend you also. But at times it can be kind of very difficult for you to manage. Because in court of law, all these big cases have all these economic textbook models which can help you or kill you. And that was one reason why Microsoft was off the hook. And second reason was they were able to show something which Schumpeter. Have you heard Schumpeter's name? Yes. Schumpeter is famous for what? Anybody remember? Constructive, creative discussion. Another reason why Schumpeter was also used by Microsoft. They said we are in an industry where a lot of creative discussion is going on. So today we may seem like monopoly, but tomorrow we may not be monopoly. So don't look at the static situation of our company. Monopoly is illegal in the US. That's why they have big trouble. So they said We are today seeming to be monopolists, but we are fighting against ourselves. Whenever we launch a new product, we are competing. And then this is a product which can be kind of made by all the people also. But today it seems like a new product that Windows Office and all. And you see the evidence of it today already. You see Google Office now in the market. Red Hat, Linux based stuff, and so many things are coming in. Although they're still kind of not a place where they are able to challenge the Microsoft so easily. But gradually they're gaining ground. And whatever as the standards are kind of or the whatever the applications and the operating software and everything gets standardized, you find it very easy to kind of replicate. So these days you might find out people don't want their own computer to be clocked by the Microsoft software. Most of the things you don't need. You can just go to Google, it's still very elementary stuff. You can just work online. Cloud computing and all which is happening, which is very, very different to Microsoft. So the Great Depression was basically, I'm coming back to again the discussion, how the fiscal policy was used, and this fiscal policy became very common in the 50s to 70s, and actually Second World War was a major, you can say, event which made the US economy out of recession also. Till about the starting of 1938 and 39, when it started the Second World War, US was still not reached the level of 1929. That's almost a decade. But once the war took off, then entire capacity, which was excess capacity, was very efficiently used and then effectively things were taken care of. And also in 1946 there was an act passed in the US which said the role of the government in the US is also to promote full employment. Now there is something called automatic stabilizer, which start working without doing anything. In any country, especially in developed countries, but in many developing countries also. Suppose you have a recession. What happens in recession? People's incomes get smaller. As the income gets smaller, what happens? The tax payment becomes lower, and that automatically stabilizes the economy to some extent. Or the reverse, when the economy is booming, like in India, what is tax collection growing at what rate in India? GDP is growing at about 7-8%. But how much is the tax collection growing? About 30-40%. Why? It should grow at the same level as this maximum. Why is it growing at a much higher level? Slab. So the slab people are moving into the higher end slab. As they move it, suddenly from 10% you jump to 20%. From 0, 10%. 10 to 20, 20 to 30. So one of my relatives, he is a pensioner. Currently with 6 pay commission. Earlier he was not paying tax. Not only the new pay commission in areas and all, he got into the tax bracket. So, suddenly, government is paying you more, but also taking away from you because now you are in tax category which is higher. So you get something and automatically that stabilizes. But it means what? As the economy is growing, there is price impact in the sense it start going up, but if you tax away some proportion, then to that extent demand also goes down. Yes. Same thing, but then again there will be a kind of a little bit of impact, then again after some time it will down. You take a new DTC system, that is still kind of being debated, and most of it is diluted. The original idea, what they were thinking about 15 lakhs and all, that has been diluted significantly. So net what will happen next year, we don't know. GST is already off. And also when the economy is in a recession, you start spending more on the welfare. You start spending more on the welfare, automatically demand is generated, and that helps the economy to some extent out of recession. This part we have discussed already, so I am just skipping. One of the major problems criticism of the fiscal policy is that you have to have a very, very activist government ministers or whoever are in charge of the fiscal policy. Because if you are not, you can actually worsen the exercise. How? Suppose economy is getting into recession now, and you get to know only now. What you do? You do something now. The impact will come after 1 year. Because the moment you start spending doesn't mean what happens in the government budget normally from April to March. Now in March you have given the money to them, but does it mean that you will actually spend immediately? So there's only ministries involved, so many people are involved. So most of the ministries you see, many times you spend the money in last end of the month, end of the year, towards March. So what happens? By the economy may have already turned, and now you're spending the money. What happens? You actually creating more inflation. You're not making it. That's a major criticism of the government. That if they are not kind of prepared in advance, they may not be actually helping the cycle. They might be actually making work. So you're spending money when you should not be spending, and actually cutting down when you should not be cutting down. That's why there is a major problem right now going on. I think there was a news item yesterday I was reading. Paul Krugman and another guy who was a professor of financial history, Ferguson. You might have read the news yesterday. They were fighting. Keynes, basically Keynesian perspective is what they are fighting for. Krugman says you should spend more money, more fiscal policy. The other guy, Ferguson, is believes enough. You should not spend more money. What do you think? Who's right? Any perspective? Timing is important.
Where do you spend money?
Yes, I'm asking you. Something called eye contact. Did you get a question? Or you are busy with something else? Huh? If you are busy with some of your friends. I don't understand this. If you have your attendance mark, if you are not interested, why spend more time here and feeling you have to say sorry? So these are Ferguson. I will give you some interesting references on it. He has a very interesting book. Some of you are interested in finance, you read that. And that was a major reason that present financial crisis. You've seen people forget history. And if you forget history, you know there is saying history. Those who forget, they are condemned to repeat it. And this capitalism and the capitalism every 10 years. The cycle comes, they don't learn from it, and then they make the things worse and worse and worse, and then the present crisis is a pretty bad one. And that's why you see, again, you saw the industry growth numbers last week. It was like this, and it came down. They're all uncertainty in the world. And a lot of people are believing the stock market, the way the valuations are going, are completely unreal. It's going to crash again. And I don't know what to say things, but I'm worried about all of you. So the uncertainty is pretty high right now in the world economy. And the chances, the way expenditure is getting cut down, which Krugman is being worried is, everybody seems to be thinking we are out of recession, and everybody is cutting down government expenditure. Fiscal policy is being rolled back, and that basically can make things much worse. Although Ferguson's argument is that if government borrows too much, you can end up like Greece problem. What is Greece problem? Has anybody kind of bothered to examine the issue? Too much debt. But why are they having this problem? Have you ever thought? Again, related to your Chinese example.
Greece actually is a smaller economy as compared to the other economies in the region. And the policy measures that are decided are basically the base is consisting of the bigger economies, the Germans, French. They decide the policy measures as per the size of their economy.
No, but their own economy, how can Germany get their
government expenditures, the level of government expenditures are decided based on the developed economies. And Greece was not yet developed. It was in a developing stage, and that's why it faced problems.
You're right, but there's something linked to this. The euro and
some of the numbers to make it seem that they
they were kind of not exaggerating, reverse of the exaggeration. They were under-reporting their fiscal deficit. But again, why should this be a problem? I mean, it's my thing. India also should be under-reporting fiscal deficit for a long period.
Undertaking will get affected. So all the people thought they were really something when that wasn't the case. So people invested in them and
something important which I'm telling you, that's how it is very important for China. The related to Greece you can ask.
The euro is trading in euro, and it was affecting all the nations are trading in euro. So they all.
So how does euro affect? You're right, but how does euro, Greece, China all get related, and Germany, France?
So because they were, borrowing so much money, there was a chance that they would default on their 10-year government bonds which they have. And now because the whole eurozone uses the same common currency, that have a trickle-down effect on the euro, which is common for the other countries also. So that is where the other countries step in and salvage.
What is the easy solution for Greece?
Greece cannot print so much because it is long.
Greece cannot print so money. So what the best solution for Greece would have been to just walk out of the monetary union and say, I will depreciate my currency by 50%. If I depreciate my currency, what will happen? My export will be competitive. All the debt which seems very bad will become okay. So why is debt a problem? Because I am not able to depreciate my currency. I am not able to distribute my export. Which means I cannot get this multiplier impact benefit. Because this Germany and France are sitting there, they are not allowed the euro to be depreciated. Because they benefit from it. And mine is a very small country problem. And I cannot depreciate. So effectively what will happen? I have to kind of suffer because these guys are holding on to the currency. If I was my own country, suppose I was not part of the monetary union, then that problem is not there. I can just depreciate, immediately get rid of all this. And what will happen? My debt, if I have a lot of inflation, my debt will become very small automatically.
The moment you do that, the credit rating goes down.
Who cares about it? I have to first be sustainable.
But in future you don't get any
I don't want. I will earn through exports.
It will not be sustainable then.
See, the thing is, main problem is that they are not allowing. What are these trust numbers based on? That your growth will be very bad. If I am able to pay back whatever I borrowed from you, then it's not any problem. Why should you have any problem? I'm paying back my debt. Your problem will be when I don't honor the debt. That's why the country had to rescue Greece. When the Greece walks out, what happened? European Union, European Monetary Union will have only two countries, Germany and France. Nobody else will do. Because you are giving up your monetary policy. And when will you give up? When you get something in return. If you don't give me anything, why will I stay here? Why do you think UK doesn't want to be part of the monetary union? UK wants its monetary independence. That's the bottom line. In India, for instance, the European Union is already there in India actually. All the states, they have already given their right to print money to the central government. They don't realize it, that's a different issue, but because it happened much earlier. So, but effectively the same thing happened, but they are happening much later. So the conflicts are much more serious. And Krugman, when this 1999, when this monetary union happened, they said it's not a sustainable monetary union. It is they will land up in this problem. And that's what is happening now. So Krugman's basic solution for Greece is stop the union. Get out of it. It doesn't solve your problem at all. Your problems are very different because your level of development is very different than France and Germany. They have a completely different perspective. So it doesn't help you at all. So the lags and all this is coming back to fiscal policy. The fiscal policy is the only instrument which is available to them. But with a very restriction, huge restriction, means you cannot monetize your revenue. Which means you cannot play with your exchange rate. All that is gone. You cannot print money. We'll discuss that total money in more detail. So this is a typical government budget looks like. This is a hypothetical example. You have government spend money on various things: industry, interest payments, social welfare, medical, national defense, and others. And budget surplus deficit, you know all this, I don't know, and you will have any special discussion in your third term. So I'm not really going too much into details numbers. So what is the rationale for now deficit after all this discussion is that whenever you have major wars, you cannot do all about fiscal deficit. You will finance it. Then Keynesian economics we have already done, automatic stabilization we have done also, and also if you have large capital projects. then you cannot be worried about fiscal deficit. Because why? There is an impact which is negative of higher fiscal deficit. But again, it's more than counterweight or kind of balanced by the positive side of it. It means if you are creating very some new assets, which is kind of more or less add significant amount to the GDP, then it makes no kind of rethinking about spending that money. Suppose you create a fiscal deficit and spend it on say transportation in the country. The positive impact will far outweigh the negative part aspect. Similarly, suppose you spend our money in creating educational institutions, free education for everybody, or kind of a reasonable amount of charges even then is good enough, health for everybody, or infrastructure, road infrastructure or some other kind of infrastructure. All these are kind of a self-pay if you do it properly. Only thing you should not siphon off the money. You siphon off, what is the problem? Not from an idealistic reason. Siphoning off money means it goes away from the low NPC people. Sorry, it goes from high NPC people, which means people who are big spenders. In the sense, big spender means as a proportion of income. It means if you give money to the poor person, and guy will spend it, the stimulation impact will be very big. But when the money gets siphoned off, it actually just goes to the relatively richer people. That's my worry. My worry is not that they should not be corrupt. My worry is when they are getting money, they are saving most of it. And when they are saving most of it, maybe actually not even within the country also, maybe outside. That also has not much of a significant positive impact. So my worry about corruption is that it doesn't help my country people. Corruption helps my country people, I'm all for it. But it helps some other people in Switzerland and somewhere else, UPS and all. I don't like it. So there are three ways in which budget can be balanced. One is annually balanced budget. This is what in your class school says government should not spend any money extra. But again, you saw in the balanced budget plan, even that is not too bad. But it's best in the countries that are prone to cycles, would be good to have a cyclical balance. When you are down cycle, you have a deficit. When you have up cycle, since you are booming, that time you have a surplus. So that automatically some deficit balances the surplus when you are going is good. And third is country like India, functional finance. That depends on your development requirement of your country. You need huge amount of capital. It could be roads, education, health, social infrastructure, whatever. You should actually go out of your way to even create fiscal deficit. Only thing is there is a limit to it also, because the thing is some countries they overdid it, and in those countries it created a big problem. And those countries are basically Latin American countries. They ran deficit to the tune of 25% of the GDP, and that obviously was not sustainable because you're again creating too much demand. There is no production side kind of able to take care of that. So effectively that leads to very high inflation. Something you might be knowing as hyperinflation. Do you know what is the definition of hyperinflation? Anybody? When you call an economy hyperinflation?
So when the value of money devalues a lot, like for example, hyperinflation, the money also.
I asked the definition. So give me an example. When we say a country is going to hyperinflation, what number? Huh? More than 20%. More than 100% annually? 30% annually. 30% per month. If inflation is more than 30% per month, then you say it's going to hyperinflation. Because if it is 30% per month, what will be annual inflation? 30% and 12 months. It means 760%. This is cumulative. So when you cut 760% annually, you are termed as going to hyperinflation. And Germany has gone through it. It's a very interesting story. We can share with you.
So what about Zimbabwe?
What about Zimbabwe? Recent times going through Russia. Recent times Hungary, Israel. Many countries have gone through that.
But such high inflation is, how is it sustainable?
How is it sustainable?
Yeah, if like the inflation is 760% as you're talking about, so how will the economy sustain? I mean,
Economic collapse. What happens? Economy doesn't sustain. Hyperinflation, economic collapse.
And what can be the cause of such hyperinflation?
Vast is cause. One, I get fiscal deficit. You have too much deficit and you're not able to raise taxes and you start printing out money and output does not increase. Supply cover is more than given. You're not able to increase supply. What will happen? Lead to inflation. And inflation means what? Because inflation, workers will ask for more wages. If they ask for more wages, what will happen? The cost will go up. And not only to take care of the cost, you will again increase the price. So you raise price by and that becomes sometimes difficult to control. That's why a lot of people, when they look at suspiciously the government, that's another important example. Africa and Latin America, where the government has a very irresponsible. How do they come out of it? How do they come out of it? One simple thing they come out is, government gives commitment that they will have a very balanced budget. They will have no deficit. Which means I am not going to print any more money. That's one. And second thing is, you change your currency to 1 million times the old currency. So that means now you say 1 million or 1 billion is equal to 1. And that automatically everything becomes 1 now. The increment also is 1, not in 1 billion. So that way, you change your currency basically. Which is what Argentina did and all. But the thing is, a lot of countries are very prone to this kind of problem. They are not able to solve it. Especially Latin America, Chile. Chile is one example which actually fought it out. But Argentina, Brazil, and many countries took a lot of time. They almost, it said that 60s and 70s were 0 decades for most of the Latin American countries because they were not able to control the hyperinflation situation. So, since we talk about inflation, let me just give you some idea about inflation, 10-15 minutes which I have. But let me finish this part and then I'll come back to that. There are two terms that are very commonly used, crowding out and crowding in. And this is used specifically for public expenditure, again government expenditure. Now, it's believed that government expenditure, if the government expenditure is more than its government revenue, it reaches deficit. And if it is deficit, you are not monetizing it. That means how will you get the financing? You are not, suppose you agree that you are not monetizing. You have to borrow. If you borrow from the financial sector. And if you borrow from the financial sector, what will happen? Since you are sovereign, you will get a lower interest, isn't it? So what will happen? The money is available for private sector will go down, and for them the interest rate cost will go up. That's the basic idea about crowding out. So this will work in the normal cases when you have a economy doing well and government decides to create more deficit and decides not to monetize. But in the recession situation, exactly opposite may happen. Like the US currently, if you are in a deep recession, if you spend more money, you create more deficit. Financial markets, there are money available, there are liquidity. Which means even if you take more money, it does not really reduce money for the private sector. It actually may encourage private sector. Because the moment you are in deep recession, you buy more products, you are actually creating more demand for the products produced by the private company. That may be referred to as crowding in. So in deep recession, crowding out is not a problem, but in normal circumstances when the economy is growing pretty fast, crowding out could be a potential problem. That's why government deficits are not encouraged when the economy is doing very well. And I think with the flow and stocks and flows, so fiscal deficit is a flow, and accumulation of fiscal deficit is a stock. We call public debt. One of the, now coming back to a little bit again other countries, India and East Asian countries. You remember East Asian crisis in 1997? You might have read about it. You were young at the time, maybe in school or something. But that was majorly caused by public debt problem. What had happened? These countries were having significant trade deficit. But government budget was balanced. You remember that three-way identity we discussed. S minus I is equal to G minus T minus M minus X. So G minus T was virtually 0 for this country. So they had no deficit in government account. But they had no deficit of the trade account. And that fueled the lot of investment from outside the country. This is all FDI and FII came in, which is like a problem if you don't have enough foreign exchange reserves. And these countries did not have enough foreign exchange reserves. And then when the economy was doing very well, there was a lot of money was flowing in. But obviously over time, if you keep importing more and more, it accumulates to a significant amount. And then when the economy suddenly people believe not going to do very well, they start taking money out. And once they take money out, what happens is called a lot of dislocation. This is what happened in the East Asian countries. The currencies depreciate. Because again, like we saw, last was kind of a situation. Everybody, some of people got to know that this is going to be kind of a major problem for these countries. A lot of people bet on these currencies. And as the currency flew out, the currency depreciated almost to the tune of 40, 50, 60, 70, 80%. And countries as strong as Korea became a major problem. So fiscal policy was not to blame, but government policy in the form of allowing private guys to borrow from the bank became a major problem. Because these countries were governed by so hard to get over people who basically had all the family members who were having a lot of companies, and since they were doing very well, everybody was investing in them. And there was no restriction. Capital controls were zero. They got in a lot of money, short-term capital from outside. But when things started going back, when the money went back, they could not really collapse. The Indian government brought in the accounts like you have a revenue receipt. Revenue is like current, like profit and loss account. And taxes, profits of public sector and fees, etc. When you make a passport, you pay fees. When you make a driving license, all that comes here in the fees, etc. And also a lot of times when you pay taxes on the property and all that, those will come here. But that normally goes to the local government, not to the federal government. And the revenue side, expenditure side, revenue expenditure is basically salaries, subsidies and old age pensions. And the difference between these two will give you revenue surplus or revenue deficit. And then comes the capital account. Capital receipts and capital receipts. Capital receipts actually is there's not nothing much here. When you sell your say Indian Oil Corporation 5% equity, that is this investment. Otherwise you don't make much capital return into it. And the second is loan, repayment, loan to any state or companies and all. That may be there. And then expenditure, bridges, schools, whatever, trains, buses, etc. Defense comes here. Defense is not considered as capital. Even if you buy a new aircraft carrier, it's considered as final demand. There is no investment. And this difference, revenue receipt plus capital receipt minus revenue expenditure minus capital expenditure is your fiscal deficit or fiscal surplus, which normally macroeconomically called budget deficit. In India, we don't call it. I think I told you already. And now, once you have the deficit, you have to decide whether you want to borrow from market or you want to borrow from the RBI. When you borrow from the RBI, it's called printing of money. But actually, it's not government just start printing. Government has to give a bond. Those are called T-bills, treasury bills, which they give it to the central bank. The central bank take those bonds and give them the money whatever they require. And in 2003, August 2003, or notified, summer of 2004, we have passed a bill, Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. What is that force of the government? Says the government, the revenue deficit will be zero in 5 years. It means 2004 will start 2009, that was last year. And the fiscal deficit will reduce to 3% in 5 years. They extended it by another 1 or 2 years because of the recession last year. I don't know the latest, but it is. So basically, there is a lot of control over the government expenditure now, which you see is very, very significant in India, right? The new class members. New class believes government is useless. And also, go back to your monetary union in Europe. The same things are there. There are also no country allowed to have more than a deficit of 3%. the Greek problem. Greeks were telling us, I have only seen the deficit are actually at 8 or 10%. So now the thing is that the problem with multi-union is, European multi-union is that you are expecting a sovereign government to salute you, which obviously these countries are not going to do. Multi-union doesn't mean I give up everything and then I keep saluting Germany and France. That's a big problem. That's why Germany and France had no choice. Angela Merkel was not ready to rescue Greece. But she had no choice. So either the multi-union breaks down or you have to rescue Greece. So towards the end, I think what you call better senses prevailed, and they decided to rescue and rescue. Greece problem was about $20 billion, but the rescue package was announced. Did you notice the number? $890 billion, or billion euros. Which means anybody else is having a problem, will also be taken care of. So don't worry, be with us. That is so this is your fiscal deficit to GDP ratio in India. This is pretty old data, almost 10 years now, and this is more recent. And again, it's found that Indian fiscal deficit is close to about 10%. It doesn't really go down very much. This year we had a very big bonanza. What was that? 3D. And also that internet-based auctioning. That together has given us a pretty big amount, about 50,000 crores. So your fiscal deficit is very, very low this year. And by next year we will go to election year. So a lot of the money which you're making, we'll be able to spend it. And this is financing as a percentage of fiscal deficit, which is budget deficit as a percentage of fiscal deficit in Indian market. And as you see, this is zero in last 2 years, and actually this is 2001, go further down, very close to zero. It means we are not monetizing the deficit anymore. Which is government is borrowing a lot of money from the open market. How does the government borrow from the open market? Bond. How does bond work? Then the government goes straight away, so give you money, I will give you a bond. How does it do it? Have you thought about the mechanism? What is the main source for the government to get financing? Fiscal is most important. Something called SLR, you heard? What is SLR? Statutory liquidity ratio. What is that? Basically,
government securities.
You have to buy government securities, and do you know what is SLR right now?
25.
About 25%. 25% of all the deposit any bank has got in India has to put in the government approved bond. That's the first major instrument through which the money goes to the finance fiscal deficit. Anything else? CRR is not. That's basically the money with the RBI. That they don't. Take it out. That is for R. Please, there's an instrument.
She's talking about repo and reverse.
But that's basically RBI buys and sells. All the banks have some bonds they can buy or sell to RBI. That's the repo and reverse. There is another financial institution which we don't know as bank, but actually does the role of bank. And that's actually the world's biggest bank. I mean, not in India, but worldwide. World Bank. World Bank actually not a bank. Most of it. You know which is the world's biggest bank? Indian Post. Actually, the Japanese Postal Bank. In India also, we are on a similar line as Japanese. The biggest bank in the world is the Japanese Postal Bank. You'll be shocked to know. It's not a typical commercial bank, Citibank or any other HSBC and all. Because in India also the same thing happens that when you go to the bank, you can have savings account, you can have a fixed deposit, you can have a checkbook. I don't know how many people know. But you have a checkbook in a post office account. And that money when you put it in a post office, where does it go? When you buy the annual deposit, those what you call national savings certificates and all. Actually, you are financing government deficit. That is another major.
So what about provident?
Provident fund also goes to government securities to quite a large extent, but that provident fund basically works for the central government employees and state government employees. But unless a lot of PPF now, the public equivalent of that. Now that they talk about that PPF and PF will be allowed to invest 5 or 10% into the stock market. So what are you doing basically here? You can see stock market in India not going to go down. If you allow these PFs to again park some money into the stock market, demand equals the supply of the stock market. Even if the company is not doing very well, the stock will do well. So there, everybody wants to buy those limited amounts of number of. That's why government to strengthen or to show the stock market going even higher. Coal India is one of the biggest IPOs. And they are putting 10% more from Indian Oil Corporation, 5% from some blue chip public companies. So all these really strengthen, broaden the base. This is not a peaceful privatization. You do 5%, 5%, 5%, and one day it will be 51%, and then it will be privatized. Because in India, it's very difficult to do one go privatization. This is what BJP tried to do, and really suffered very badly. Although they did not do a lot of these things which they were announcing that they will do. One of the important things they have to privatize, everybody who wants to privatize, is Ashoka Hotel. It can actually finance another 10,000 or 15,000 crores. I don't know how much is the price for that property. The problem is that it's next to the Prime Minister's house. So it's a really good idea to sell a Prime Minister's house and Ashoka Hotel and relocate the Prime Minister somewhere else. Because it's just a waste of a huge amount of private assets. So maybe give him a helicopter or whatever and take him out, maybe good now. I could not start the price part, so we'll start it later. I have about 3-4 minutes. Anybody has a question?